You ever get to the end of the day and realize you're basically on autopilot the whole time, making choices but not really choosing? Well, it turns out a huge part of our life is run by a kind of hidden code, and today we're going to crack that code. We're talking about habits and how just understanding them can unlock some truly profound changes in your life.
And hey, this is not some new age idea. Way back in 1892, the psychologist William James basically said our lives are just a big bundle of habits. I mean, think about it. The way you brush your teeth, the route you take to work, you don't really think about that stuff, do you? It's all automatic. So the real question becomes, what if you could actually get in there and take control of the autopilot?
Okay, let me tell you about Lisa Allen. When researchers first met her, she was 34 years old, struggling with her weight, smoked a pack a day, was deep in debt, and just couldn't seem to hold down a job. But a few years later, you wouldn't even recognize her. She'd lost 60 pounds, was running marathons, had quit smoking, and was absolutely crushing it in her career.
So how on earth did she pull that off? And no, it wasn't winning the lottery or some magic pill. The answer is actually a really simple, learnable framework for re-engineering her habits. A framework that, as you're about to see, absolutely anyone can use.
It all starts by understanding this simple little pattern in our brains. And I mean every single habit. From biting your nails to checking your phone every 2 minutes, it all follows the exact same neurological pattern. It's called the habit loop.
It really just boils down to a simple, three-step process. First, you've got the cue. That's the trigger. It could be a time of day, a place, even a feeling. Next up is the routine, which is the habit itself. And finally, you get the reward, the little prize that tells your brain, hey, that was good, let's remember this whole sequence for later. Cue, routine, reward. That's the blueprint for every single habit you have.
So, how do we know all this? Well, you can thank some clever scientists at MIT and a few rats who really like chocolate. They put these rats in a maze, and at first, their little brains were firing on all cylinders trying to figure it out. But once they learned the route to the chocolate, something amazing happened. Their brain activity would spike at the cue, a loud click, and then again at the reward, the chocolate. But in between, while they were running the maze, their brains went almost completely silent. The habit was on autopilot.
So who's in charge of this whole automation department? It's a deep, ancient part of our brain called the basal ganglia. You can basically think of it as your brain's efficiency expert. It sees a routine you do over and over, and it says, you know what, I'll take this one, turning it into a habit so the rest of your brain can save energy for more important things, like, avoiding a predator or trying to figure out a new spreadsheet.
And if you want some truly wild, real-world proof of this, just look at the incredible case of a man named Eugene Pauly. A virus completely destroyed the parts of his brain responsible for memory. He literally couldn't draw a map of the rooms in his own house. But his basal ganglia was perfectly fine. So even though he couldn't remember his neighborhood, his wife noticed he could take a walk around the block every day and find his way home no problem. His habit brain was still working, even when his memory wasn't.
Okay, so we've got the three pieces of the puzzle: cue, routine, reward. But that's just the blueprint, right? That's not what makes a habit stick. There's another secret ingredient that really acts as the engine for this whole thing.
Yeah, if the loop is the car, what's the gas? What is the actual driving force that makes us repeat that loop over and over and over until it's totally unconscious?
Well, the answer comes from a fantastic story from the world of advertising. Back in the early 1900s, almost nobody brushed their teeth. An ad genius named Claude Hopkins was hired to sell Pepsodent toothpaste. He found a great cue, that filmy feeling you get on your teeth, and a great reward, a beautiful smile. But his real masterstroke was adding mint oils. This created a cool, tingling sensation. And pretty soon, people didn't just want a nice smile. Their brains started to crave that tingle. That feeling became the real driver. And that, right there, is the secret ingredient. It's craving. Your brain doesn't just register the reward after it happens. It starts to anticipate it, to want it beforehand. Think about when your phone buzzes. That's the cue. You're not just checking it as a routine. You're driven by a craving for that tiny hit of social connection. Craving is the engine that makes the habit loop spin.
Okay, so we know how habits get built. Now let's get to the part we all care about. How do we break the bad ones and build better ones? Turns out, there's a simple, really powerful rule for hacking any habit you want.
So the first thing you have to understand is this: you can't just delete a bad habit. It's not like dragging a file into the trash can. That neural pathway is literally etched into your brain. So the key isn't trying to erase it. The key is to hijack it and rewrite it.
And this brings us to what's called the golden rule of habit change. And it is shockingly simple. You keep the old cue, the old trigger, and you deliver the exact same reward your brain is craving. The only thing you change is the routine in the middle. That's it. That's the whole framework.
Let's make this real. So, there was a woman named Mandy who was a lifelong nail biter. Let's break it down. Her cue was a slight feeling of tension in her fingertips. The routine, obviously, was to bite her nails. And the reward she was craving was that sense of physical completion, of getting rid of that tension.
So here's the golden rule in action. Her therapist told her to keep the cue and the reward. The only thing they changed was the routine. So whenever she felt that tension in her fingertips, instead of biting, she would immediately put her hands in her pockets or just rub her arm. And guess what? She got the same physical satisfaction, the same reward, but from a brand new, non-destructive habit, and it totally worked.
Now that golden rule is incredibly powerful. But researchers found that for some habits, especially the really tough ones, it wasn't always enough to make the change permanent. There was one more piece to the puzzle.
See, the new habit holds up just fine under normal, everyday life. But what happens when real stress hits? A family crisis, a horrible day at work. When that pressure mounts, that old, deeply ingrained habit can come roaring back. So what is it that makes a new habit strong enough to survive the storm?
Well, studies of groups like Alcoholics Anonymous found the missing ingredient. It's belief. The people who made it through the toughest times didn't just swap out a routine, they had developed a genuine, profound belief that change was actually possible for them. And here's the critical part. That belief almost always came from being part of a group, a community of people who all shared that same belief.
So at the end of the day, change is absolutely possible, but it very rarely happens in a vacuum. Whether it's a workout buddy, a support group, or even just one other person who truly believes in you, that shared belief is often the glue that makes a new habit stick for good.
So there you have it. You have the code. You identify the loop, the cue, routine, and reward. You figure out what craving is driving it. Then you use the golden rule to swap in a new routine. And finally, you find someone to believe with. You now know exactly how your habits work. So the only question left is, which one are you going to change first?